All right, and that was it from the lunchtime break. I hope you enjoyed it so far. I did at least, and yeah, and now we're rocking the WVD Tech Fest with our afternoon program, and we have a very, very special guest for now prepared for you. Esther Barthel will present you Lights, Camera, GitHub Actions. Enjoy the show. Esther, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Patrick. So let me just quickly share my screen. And if all goes well, you should be able to see all the fun right now. So let's get started with some GitHub Actions. So first of all, let's say a big thank you to our partners, because without them, this awesome event would not have been possible. So thank you, all sponsors, and let's not waste any more time and dive into a quick introduction of who I am. For those of you who have not seen me around in the community, my name is Esther Barthel. I've been a technical consultant in end-user computing for over 20 years now. I've done it all: designing, implementing, troubleshooting, Citrix, Windows, virtual desktops, all in the game. And I've also very invested in some of the well-known community programs like the Citrix Technology Professionals, Microsoft MVPs, and I'm a very proud founding leader of the CUGC Women in Tech Mentorship Program. And I'd be happy to tell you all about it, but I think today we're going to focus on the technical stuff. So for those of you who are wondering what my expertise is, for the last 5 years, I've been mainly focused on DevOps and automation. Automating Windows, Citrix, lately also cloud, using REST APIs, JSON payloads, and PowerShell, my favorite scripting language. But let's dive into the topics of today. So we're going to focus quickly on cloud DevOps, zoom in on GitHub Actions, what they are all about, how you can use them, and then I'll focus on Windows Virtual Desktop and how I'm using GitHub Actions to automate my deployments. And of course, I have prepared some cool demos, recordings, but still the same. They're going to be cool. So zooming in on cloud DevOps. If we're looking at the definition, it basically states that it's a set of practices that combine software development and IT operations. And as you can see, it's kind of representing the infinite life cycle of our DevOps solutions, our cloud solutions and services. And if I would have to translate the tooling and the focus for me, if we're talking about DevOps, as you can see, it's mainly focused on PowerShell, Windows Virtual Desktop, doing operations, monitoring as well, and diving into Azure DevOps to build that CI/CD pipelines. But right now, this presentation will mostly focus on the build, coding, and deployment of Windows Virtual Desktop. And I have to admit that when I first was gonna search for basically the coolest tooling in regards to DevOps, I kind of was overwhelmed because there are a lot of tools out there that will help you in your automated orchestration, testing, deploying, all the different phases of your DevOps journey. So to kind of answer that question, is there one tool to rule them all? I could do the very well-known consultant answer and basically say, well, it depends. But truth is, for me at least, it's not about the tool itself. It's about the fun journey of diving into DevOps and automated deployments, especially now that we are migrating to cloud services. And to basically give you a small background on what WVD automation was for me, I'm just going to give you a quick recap, because that will make you understand why this presentation today is focused on GitHub Actions. So for me, 2020 was mostly focused on Azure Automation fun, as I like to call my cloud DevOps adventures. And that fun consisted of exploring ARM templates for automated deployments in Azure, focusing on the Azure PowerShell module to script even more creative deployments, automation, even management solutions. Looking at Azure Automation to see how that can support me in automated deployments. Once again, you can see the pattern here. And even looking at release pipelines in Azure DevOps to see if I could even extend it and include more collaboration with team members. But at the end of the cool presentations, I basically got this cool question that asked me, so what about GitHub Actions? And I had to admit that I didn't have any experience yet with GitHub Actions. So instead of just saying, well, I'm sorry, I am not familiar with GitHub Actions, I basically turned the question around and made it a challenge for myself to dive into GitHub Actions. So this is how this presentation, my Cloud DevOps Adventure Part 2, got started. So let's dive into GitHub Actions. Because that's what we're here for, right? If we're looking at GitHub Actions, they are automated tasks within your software development lifecycle, or even your infrastructure as code lifecycle. They are mostly event-driven, which means that a specified event will trigger the run of a series of commands. So looking at that in a more architectural way, to get a better understanding of the different concepts of GitHub Actions. Once again, it starts with an event that is the specified activity or trigger to start a workflow. And this trigger can either be a webhook, it can be a scheduled event, or manual. And if we're zooming in on the workflow, that can contain one or more jobs. And each job is a set of steps that is run on the same runner or agent, depending on the solution that we're talking about. But focusing on GitHub Actions, we call them runners. Diving into further steps. So a step is an individual task, and it can either run a shell command or it can run an action. And actions are the fun part of GitHub Actions. Because you can create your own actions, or you can check out the marketplace and use one of the already pre-created community GitHub Actions. If we're looking at the workflow and how you should build your workflow, you need to be aware of it that it uses YAML for syntax. And I was going to include a speed course on YAML, but that would take a bit of time away from the demos. So I just included the slides still in this slide deck that I will share with you afterwards. But for now, we're just going to skip the speed course and dive right into the fun. So your YAML workflows need to be placed within your GitHub repo in the .github/workflows folder. And if you put it there, they will be automatically detected and picked up and available for you on the Actions tab. And that allows you to see the progress, do troubleshooting, check out all the different steps of a workflow that was run, and what triggered it. And in my case, for demo purposes, I'm going to use a manual trigger. So now that we have a starting point for GitHub Actions, I figured it would be more fun to take you through the different steps that I did to discover the actions. So once again, this is just an example of building your first workflow YAML file. Using an event, in this case, it's going to be a push that is going to be the trigger for this workflow. And as you can see, it defines one job with a couple of steps. And these steps uses actions that are taken from the marketplace and predefined, pre-configured, available for you, or you can run different commands, shell commands. And I've already mentioned it a couple of times, but for me, it was an eye-opener to discover that there are over 6,000 already pre-built actions that you can easily use. And these are not just from the community, so programmed by different individuals, but these are also actions that are fully supported by Azure itself, for instance, if you look at these examples. So I think it's now time, with this short introduction of GitHub Actions, to focus on Windows Virtual Desktop. And I'm guessing because that's the theme of this event, and you already had a couple of presentations to sit through, that you already have a basic understanding of Windows Virtual Desktop. So you do realize that there's a part managed by Microsoft, and there's this huge part, important part, that is managed and under your control within your subscription. So today, my GitHub Actions are also going to focus on that part that you control, mainly the desktops and applications. So we're going to focus on those session hosts and applications. So I figured a good starting point for my first GitHub action would be to start with creating a host pool for Windows Virtual Desktop. And also making sure that by creating that host pool, I would also automatically add some session hosts to that host pool. So this screen should probably be familiar for some of you who have already gone through that process in the Azure portal. So the main parts that are important when we're focusing on the virtual machines or the session host is that the portal allows you to select your own VM size, but it also allows you to not just select a pre-configured image from the marketplace provided by Microsoft, but to also select a custom-made image created by yourself and hosted from the shared image gallery. And this is where, for me at least, the fun part is, because this is the part where you take control of your session hosts. And in order to do that in an automated way, Azure also provides the Azure VM Image Builder service that allows you to build your own custom image and automatically host it or distribute it to the shared image gallery. And we're definitely gonna get back to these cool services. So once again, focusing on GitHub Actions. And I'm gonna quickly talk you through some of those community actions that I'm gonna use to automate my WVD deployments. So first off, as I already introduced the star of the show, the Azure Virtual Machine Image action to build my custom image. And this basically, if we're looking at the definition of this action, allows me to provide some input values to trigger or to start and kick off this action in an automated way. So general input that I can provide is the managed identity that Azure Image Builder uses to build that virtual machine. Next up is I can provide the source to use as input for that virtual machine. And that can be a platform image, so a predefined image from the marketplace, or an image from the shared image gallery, even a managed image. I can also specify some customizations that need to take place when Azure Image Builder is building that custom image for us. And I can specify a source, and we'll dive into that in just a few seconds, and a customizer script. And of course, I can specify where to distribute the created image to. And in our examples, it will mostly be the shared image gallery. And to make sure that after the Azure Image Builder is finished, that we know what it created, you can also specify some of the output that it needs to return after the action is run. So that's the first action that I'm going to use. Another cool action that I'm going to use is the Azure login. This allows me to easily authenticate myself against Azure. In this case, I can provide credentials to be used, or basically specify the service principal that I want to use for my automated tasks. And that basically brings me to another section within your GitHub repository. And that's within the settings. You can predefine secrets that you can use. And this allows you to not put any sensitive information, authentication information, in clear text in your actions or in your workflow YAML file. But you can reference these secrets so you can provide that information in a secure way. And the cool part about the Azure credential secret is that it doesn't only allow you to use a string as your secret, but you can even use a JSON formatted string. In this case, that allows me to provide all the service principal information that I need to authenticate against Azure: the client ID, secret, tenant ID, and subscription ID. So this is definitely a cool action to use when working with Azure. The other one is Azure PowerShell. That allows me to quickly use the Azure PowerShell module within my workflow. And last but not least, to take full advantage of the repository that I have on GitHub, I can use the checkout action. That allows me to basically check out my repository to my runner and make all the scripts and repo files available for my automated actions. And to get a quick understanding of how you can implement those actions within your workflow, you just hit that Use Latest Version button and it will give you an example of how to configure this within your workflow. So back to Windows Virtual Desktop. Let's start with that image automation. So focusing on GitHub Actions, as mentioned before, I am going to use for demo purposes a manual trigger, because this allows me to just go to the Actions tab in my repo and just select the workflow that I want to run and then manually start that one. But you can also use push or pull requests as your event trigger. Next up, you can specify environment variables that will be configured on your runner. And this allows me to basically provide parameters or input for the runner and the actions that I want to use, because they can reference those environment variables. Next, we're going to zoom in on the job. And with each job, you need to specify what type of runner you want to run it on. That can be Linux, Ubuntu, or Windows. And in this case, I'm even specifying that I want the latest OS version to be used. And then we're going to zoom in on some of the actions. As I mentioned before, I'm mainly using the already created community actions in this case within my workflow. And the first one is the Azure login. So I can easily provide that secret, that Azure credential secret, to authenticate myself against Azure. And then the runner can pick up the next task, and that is the Azure Build VM image action. That allows me to get started with Azure Image Builder, provided with all the information or input that it needs to get started, like the source information. So I'm using a platform in Windows, including Office, and I'm using the 20H2 version, multi-user Windows 10. Next up, I can also specify customizer source. And in this case, I'm specifying the folder within my GitHub repo as the source for all my customizations. And this allows me to quickly reference a PowerShell script with the customizations to perform in the next step, the customizer script, because that basically now references to the copied folder on my runner. And last but not least, the distribution information. So here is where I specify Azure Image Builder to distribute the created custom image to my shared image gallery. I do understand that that's a lot of information, so let's just show you the workflow in action. As you can see, I'm triggering it manually by just hitting Run Workflow, and then I can zoom in on the workflow that is being processed. As you can see, it starts with a setup job that prepares your runner with all the information that it needs, or even some repository actions based on the actions that I defined in the workflow. The checkout already was performed, so I already have access to my repository. Now I'm logging into Azure with that secret Azure_credentials. And next up is the Azure Image Builder action. And this takes quite some time. So I do hope that you will forgive me for recording the demo, because this allows me to quickly speed through the different steps and make sure that we're not staring for 55 minutes to the same screen waiting for the image builder to be done. So as you can see, it now uses the template, and that template is running to create that custom image for us. And Azure Image Builder also uses a temporary resource group for all the information, including a storage account that will store the log file for Packer, which is the service that Azure Image Builder uses under the hood. So now we just have to wait for everything to be finished. So fast forward. And as you can see, I now have a custom image. So this allows me to automate the image creation and even do like a weekly or a monthly update on that custom image by just extending the customizations that need to take place. For instance, to include Windows updates. But the cool part, of course, is that we cannot just use this to automate our images. We can also use it for the Windows Virtual Desktop deployments. So let's look at the action that I built or created, the workflow that I created to create a host pool with, in this case, just one instance, because I am on a cheap budget, being Dutch and all. So once again, using a manual trigger, specifying environment variables, in this case for the host pool name and the instance. And then I'm gonna run the Azure PowerShell action that allows me to use the Azure PowerShell module. And in this case, I'm gonna run an inline PowerShell script, because this allows me to keep all the latest and greatest within my workflow. But I could easily also reference to a script within my repository. So in this case, the inline script starts by retrieving those environment variables that were set in a previous step. And then I'm going to create, because that's the way how I like to do my deployments, create a template parameter object, because that allows me to be more dynamic with the specifications of all the parameters, input parameters for my ARM template. because that's basically the next step. So I'm downloading the ARM template from my GitHub repository. I probably could have copied it because the checkout action allows me to already make my repository files available on the runner. But this is basically reusing a PowerShell script that I previously created. And last but not least, I'm gonna start the ARM template deployment with the PowerShell or the new AZ resource group deployment PowerShell commandlet, specifying the resource group, the template file, and the parameter objects. Once again, showing you a quick demo of how this workflow runs. So this one will create the Windows Virtual Desktop host pool. So it's a new host pool that is going to be created. So once again, it's going to start with that setup job to prepare the runner with all the information. It's going to log in to Azure. And then it's going to run that inline PowerShell script with the AZ PowerShell module. And this module also allows me to use key vault entries or key vault secrets. So I can maintain a centralized place for all the secrets. And as you can see, I'm double checking through the Azure portal if the deployment actually got started. And as you can see, it's already quite far in the deployment, which is a good sign. So I fast forwarded just to make sure that we're not going to stare at the same screen for a couple of minutes. It does state that the provisioning state is succeeded. It's showing me, as with any regular ARM template deployment through PowerShell, all the input parameters, and I was looking at the output parameter to double check what the session host name is. So now going to Windows Virtual Desktop, opening up the host pool that I created, and indeed it does have that session host that I specified. So this already allows me to easily build an entire new Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure. But it would be really cool if we could also use GitHub Actions to not just run new deployments, but also to extend existing deployments or even perform management tasks. For instance, updating my host pool with newer session hosts or adding instances to a host pool. So I can also do that with GitHub Actions. And once again, I'm using that AZ PowerShell action to provide an inline PowerShell script that I previously created to run that same ARM template deployment. So as you can see, within PowerShell, I'm retrieving information both on the already existing host pool and the session host to make sure that I can dynamically provide all that information as my ARM template parameters. And then, of course, we're going to use the new AZ resource group deployment commandlet to run my ARM template deployment once more. So zooming in on this action, I will give you a bit of background of why I think this is one of the more important actions to use. As I mentioned before, it's not just to deploy a new Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure or deployment, it's also usable for maintenance on our host pools and session hosts. So I'm just quickly skipping through these steps because I think you already have figured out that it's basically using the same rhythm. So once again, the ARM template deployment was successful, and I now should have a new session host within my host pool. So going back to that host pool, checking the session host. As you can see, it now has 2 session hosts. And the reason why I think, and I'm gonna see if I can pause the video real quick. So the reason why I think this is a very important action from a maintenance perspective is that if I combine this with the previous action to build my own custom image, or to even create a newer version of an existing custom image, I can mix and match those actions and do full session host updates, because this host pool is specified to check my shared image gallery for the latest version of that custom image. So if I, in the meantime, between the first session host that has version 0.1.14 of my custom image as its base image when it was deployed, and in the meantime I updated the shared image gallery image to version 0.1.17, and I do remember those numbers because those were the 2 image definitions in the shared image gallery, then it will automatically pick up that latest version when I add session host to this host pool. So basically, in this example, in this demo, there are 2 different versions of the desktop of or the virtual machine, the session host. And this is the moment where I'll just quickly play the rest of the video, because what I'm showing you next is just how easy from a user perspective it is. So this basically was recorded when I did not add that additional session host to the host pool yet. So this is logging on to the desktop version 0.1.14. And that version has customizations in it performed by the Azure Image Builder, which is an installation of Notepad++ and Acrobat Reader. But I did not include Visual Studio Code yet in this build. And this is just to show you that actually it does not exist in this build. And to give you a quick insight on how Azure Image Builder works, that action, that also specifies customization sources. So what you now see is that it copied that repo folder to the runner or to the virtual machine, the image that was used to create the image. And that one has that PowerShell script that I used for the customizations. So that PowerShell script tells it to install Notepad++ and Adobe. So this basically is the moment where I decided to run a new image and to update my session host or my host pool with a new session host. And to make sure that users are now able to use that new version, I made sure that I put the first session host with the older version in drain mode. So now if a user logs on, it will automatically start a session on that new session host. And for the user, it still feels like starting that same desktop. So the user doesn't need to do anything extra. So just to let you know that this is the 0.1.17 version, this is just to double check if Notepad++ is still installed, if Acrobat Reader is still installed. And I do realize that I maybe should have fast forwarded it just a little bit more, this demo video, but maybe that's just my impatience, to be honest. And as I mentioned in the newer version, I also added a customization to install VS Code. Just waiting to double check if VS Code is actually installed in this new version. Yes. So fortunate for me, it definitely got installed. And this is the moment when I was recording the demo that I realized that there's, of course, a much easier way to determine if these customizations were indeed applied. Because as I showed previously, we can easily go to that copied folder and check the content of that PowerShell script that was used to customize this image. And I guess this is the moment where I'm learning as an IT admin that I have to eat my own dog food and use the same virtual desktops that my users are using, which are not as fast as I imagined. So once again, the script installs Notepad++, installs Acrobat Reader, but this time it also includes the lines to install VS Code. So this definitely is a newer version of the PowerShell customization script. So this is just to show you how easy it can be to keep maintenance of your images and desktops during office hours, so to speak, without having your users go through new desktops or selecting different desktops. We can just set the old session host in drain mode and easily update the host pools with newer session hosts that will definitely have a newer version, because that's how it currently is configured with that shared image gallery image latest version to be used. So in case this kind of triggered you to also work on your Windows Virtual Desktop automation using GitHub Actions, or maybe using your own favorite DevOps tools, feel free to check out the scripts that I created and used in this demo, because I wanted to kind of build a Windows Virtual Desktop starter kit for automation. So I created my own GitHub repo called Azure WVD. And within that repo, as shown before, it not only holds the workflows that I used for the GitHub Actions, it also contains a WVD functions PowerShell script that shows you how easily you can use PowerShell scripting for WVD automation using the Azure PowerShell module. And for those of you who do not want to be dependent on the installation of PowerShell modules, I also included some examples that are using REST APIs, either through PowerShell scripts or by using one of my favorite tools, Postman. So it also includes all the configurations to get you easily set up with Postman and to get started with some basic REST API calls. And I do notice that there is still a little bit time to address some of the questions that you may have. So first of all, thank you for joining me today in my excitement and enthusiasm of using GitHub Actions. And I do like to encourage you to provide me with some feedback on this session. Was it useful for you? Did you miss some examples? Are there some things that I can improve on? Please let me know. Evaluate my session, and I'll just jump into some of the questions that might have already been asked. I'll make sure to stick around, and if you feel that you do not have any questions right now, but some questions might pop up after the event, or maybe next week when you're playing around with some of the scripts, feel free to reach out to me through social media, because I'd be happy to help you get started on some WVD automation. So once again, thanks, and enjoy all the rest of the other cool events, cool presentations that are coming up, because I'll definitely be sticking around.
Thank you very much, Esther, for your session. It was very, very exciting.
You're very welcome, Patrick.
Perfect. Let me have a look if we have any questions to you. Yeah, I have one anonymous question here. If you can please share a reference doc step by step where it says that it can spin a virtual machine. Do you have something, Esther, you could provide to our attendees?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So for me, it was very easy to find some reference documentation on the GitHub Actions. I know there are some really good documentations provided by Microsoft as well on Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure Image Builder. So feel free to just use Google, Bing, whatever your preferred search engine is. And I'm pretty sure it will be one of the first hits that will come up. I, for one, really enjoyed all the documentation. And the other cool advice that I have is to definitely check out the community, the marketplace for GitHub Actions, because they also give you, if you scroll down, because I only showed the quick introduction of each action, but if you scroll down, it gives you clear examples on how to use those actions within your workflow and YAML file.
Perfect. Thank you. Any more questions to Esther? You can feel free to raise them in the Q&A. Because we still have 15 minutes left before we jump into the next session. So it's your turn, attendees. Ask your questions.
Yes, I'll definitely make sure that I stick around, and I'm just quickly glancing over the Q&A to see if I'm not missing any questions. But I'll stick around, make sure that I'll answer some of the questions. And I guess my worries of not having enough time for all the cool stuff was not valid, because apparently I'm giving you a little bigger break to prepare yourself for the next cool presenter.
Perfect.
Oh, yes, before I let everyone go, there's a great comment from Jane. So thank you, Jane, for reminding me that I should plug the CUGC Women in Tech Mentorship Program a little bit better. But that's the reason why I'm wearing the Women in Tech shirt. So if you have any questions, if you want to be mentored, if you want to mentor others, feel free to reach out, because I'd be happy to tell you all about the program as well.
Awesome. Esther, I see another question is dropping.
Yes, me too. Is GitHub Actions free? Yes, it is. As far as I know, it is part of your free GitHub repo and subscription. I do believe that the runners might be limited on how much time you can use them, but as you already saw with the Azure Image Builder, you can run for over an hour your workflows. So definitely check it out, because there's no additional fee right now for the GitHub Actions. So yeah, I guess that's it for now.
Yeah, seems to be so. Thank you very much, Esther.
You're welcome, and enjoy the rest of the day and this awesome event. So I'm just quickly not just gonna thank the sponsors, but I'm also gonna thank you, Patrick, for being a great moderator, and Simon as well for kicking off this awesome event, because I'm really enjoying what I've seen so far.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was the intention, to empower people to stand up, to learn something, to simply share ideas. That's also helpful for us to build up the program for the next events coming up.
Yeah, definitely. And if you need any mentoring on stepping up and presenting just as enthusiastic as I would like to do, just reach out and I'd be happy to coach you and cheer you on as the next presenter on the next event.
Yeah. Sounds always good. I mean, help is always welcome. Perfect.
Yeah, no problem. And now I'm just going to shut up and give everyone those 5 minutes extra break.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Esther, for being a presenter today. Pleasure to have you. And we also appreciate if you would just evaluate Esther's session. So feel free to use the link or the QR code here and evaluate. That's also helpful for us. Esther is still around in the Q&A. So if you have any question, feel free to raise them. We are still here. And at 2 o'clock, we will continue with Jim Moyle presenting BCDR for Windows Virtual Desktop.